Hello, welcome everyone to our Inflow CX webinar. We're going to be talking today about navigating the journey from Avaya to Genesys Cloud. I've got some really great resources on here with me. Kate Doherty, who's one of our senior solutions engineers, and John Glantz, who's our VP of CX Transformation Consulting. We've got an upcoming webinar on November 16th about revolutionizing utility services. So if you're a utility, this is going to be all about adding a jolt to your customer experience, best practices, things that we're seeing innovative organizations do to enable their customers. It's going to be a great one. But if you're not here for that one and you're here for this one, like most of you are, we'll jump right into it. So we're going to go through at a very high level who InflowCX is. I'll spend a couple minutes on that, and then I'll pass it over to my great colleagues to talk about the Avaya to Genesys migration. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, but if you do have any questions during the session, I encourage you to please put them into the Q&A session. We'll be monitoring that, and if we get to a good break point or have a chance to answer the question live, we'll go ahead and do that instead of saving it to the end. So InflowCX, if you don't know who we are, we're an organization that helps you evolve your contact center technology and operations to deliver amazing experiences for your customers as well as your own agents. We help organizations evaluate, implement/deploy and optimize their customer engagement technology and strategy. We've got over 80 employees strong. We've got tons and tons of customers, and we've done CCaaS and UCaaS projects galore. Our approach is very vendor neutral. So we are not tied or married to one specific technology partner. For instance, this webinar is about Genesys Cloud. You'll see in a little bit that we've got relationships with a lot of the top players in the space. The reason we provide this vendor neutral approach to CX tech evals, BPO and labor strategy, as well as operational effectiveness engagements is because we want to make very unique and specific recommendations to our customers that are for their business, right? We provide very strategic recommendations that are focused on our customers' unique experiences and use cases and what they're trying to accomplish versus, evaluating one vendor and saying, hey, they're great, we've got expertise here, go with them. When we think about our customers, we've got several in all the top verticals. We really stay in our lane and focus just on contact center and customer experience technologies and operational effectiveness. Because of that, we're able to apply lessons learned all across different verticals and industries. So whether you're a hospitality and transportation organization, a retail firm, or a BPO, we probably have a customer that is trying to accomplish very similar things to you and know a number of different ways to do that. When we look at our technology partners, we partner with industry-leading tech, the best in the industry. We've got core contact center organizations like Genesys, like Five9, like NiceCX1, and several others on this list. We also know the unified communications space, so RingCentral, Zoom, 8x8 Teams, etc. But then there's this other entire CX ecosystem, right? There's a little bit of crossover here. For instance, Genesys, who we're talking about today, also happens to have a great WFM, WEM capabilities built into their core platform. However, some organizations need more of a point solution based on their unique business requirements. So maybe a Playvox or a Verint in this example to tie back to their Genesys Cloud or Five9 contact center system, for instance. The point of this is that there's a lot going on in this space. It is changing rapidly every single day. And if you don't have someone who is able to guide and navigate you through this, it can get really messy and confusing really quick. Luckily, InflowCX has dedicated experts that are focused on understanding, learning, and evolving with this space. So you don't have to. We've done the research, we've done the homework. Once we understand your business requirements, we can help align you with the right solution for your unique business needs. With that being said, I'll pass it over to my colleagues, Kate and John, to talk through the Avaya to Genesys migration.
Sure. Thanks, Austin. You did a nice job introducing us already. So just a little bit of setup before we get going. I'll start, and I'm going to talk about the kind of general trends that we're seeing in the marketplace today related to Avaya migration specifically. And then Kate, who's our resident kind of smartest person in the company, both from an Avaya standpoint and from a Genesys standpoint, is really going to talk about some of the differences between the technologies. And then I'll kind of bring it home with kind of a best practice standpoint in terms of how you move forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So what we're seeing from a current trends standpoint, we have seen an increase in legacy Avaya clients exploring or choosing to migrate to a number of different cloud-based telephony technology platforms. There's a couple of driving factors behind that. The first one, I think, is what's happened with Avaya. Again, they've declared bankruptcy, and they've exited bankruptcy now for the second time in 6 years. And I think people are legitimately kind of questioning their future. They announced there was a reduction in force yesterday. So they're a company that's clearly in I'll say turmoil or a little bit right now in terms of where they go from here. But also I think there are limitations related to the technology in terms of the capability of the technology that are maybe difficult to accomplish in Avaya that are much more easily accomplished, and easily being the non-technical person saying that on the call, in the cloud-based world. And so we'll touch on some of those. A lot of the clients we're seeing from this these specific types of migrations are saying, hey, let's just move our current configuration into the new technology. And this will be this is what Kate is really going to touch on. And I'll just say, at a kind of a 20,000 foot level, there isn't a direct path between Avaya or most premise-based technologies and the cloud. Meaning, I always tell clients, it's like translating English to Chinese. There are no corresponding characters. There's no similar words. This is a pretty big you're moving from one world to another world type of deal. And like I said, Kate will kind of showcase some examples of that. And I think also the thing I would leave you with in terms of this first part is clients are also recognizing they have an opportunity to align this new technology with a lot of enhanced capability and possibility to not just what they're doing currently, but what their future requirements, their current and future requirements and business objectives. And I'll touch a little bit on that later. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the smartest person in InflowCX, Kate Dockery. So.
Thanks, John. My title is actually not smartest person in the company. I am a solutions engineer here at Inflow. I also have 20-ish years experience as an Avaya engineer, and I've been working in the cloud space for the last couple of years. And so I do have a unique perspective on what it feels like to transition from that Avaya platform that I spent so much time in and moved over into the Genesys world. So like John mentioned, there isn't a direct path to migrate from your Avaya platform into the Genesys space. The technology, everything that you're doing, the experiences that you're creating in today's world in your Avaya, they can absolutely be done in a Genesys platform. They're just done a little bit differently. And where we see our customers and our end user community sort of get hung up is on some of these specific things. This probably looks very familiar to a lot of you. This is a good old vector that we're all very, very comfortable living in the Avaya space. And you can see that I've got a specific step, right? I've got step 3 highlighted because in the Avaya world, we make so many decisions using this type of step, right? Go to step 16 if staffed agents in skill first equals 0. So nobody's logged in that skill. Step 16, maybe we're routing to a different queue. Maybe we're routing to a different vector. Maybe we're simply playing a closed message that says nobody's here right now, call us back. This idea of staffed agent in Avaya also equates to the term logged in, right? We say there's nobody logged in to the skill right now. In Genesys, logged in means something completely different. In Genesys, an agent logs into the actual Genesys platform. They can be in any status at that point. They can be on break. They can be on lunch. They can actually just be available. But available does not equate to being available for calls. It equates to being calls from the queue. It equates to being available for internal type calls in the Genesys platform, right? Not those ACD calls, right? So this mindset that we have in the Avaya world of making these routing decisions based upon the term logged in or staffed is actually very different in the Genesys platform. And what I mean by that is I mentioned those reason codes, right? So in our Avaya platform, we've got our aux reason codes, right? And so we see that in the reporting. In Genesys, we also have similar codes. These are just our status codes. And what you can see right here is that my agent status right now is on queue. This in the Genesys world means two things to equate in the Avaya world. One, I am actually logged into the Genesys system and I'm actually available to take phone calls in Genesys. Now, my statuses can change, right? Now you can see that I'm in the training status. What this tells Genesys is two things. I'm still logged into the platform, but I am unavailable to take those ACD calls, right? Now I'm busy. You can see how my statuses change throughout the platform, right? So we know that making those decisions changes. Now, one other concept that changes in the Avaya world is going to be RONA, right? In Genesys, RONA doesn't require extensive setup. It's a baseline configuration that doesn't require a separate VDN or vectors or even, variables, right? It doesn't require adjustments to CMS, lamps on supervisor stations. It's just sort of there in the Genesys platform. So what you can see here is this is an example of my queue, right? My queue is named Kate Demo. I'm on the voice tab. In Genesys, RONA translates to alerting, and alerting is the number of seconds before an interaction actually times out, right? Similar function to RONA, just very different terminology, right? As John mentioned, no direct path. So you can see right here that I've set my alerting timeout to 20 seconds. It's that simple, right? I'm not creating a vector. I'm not creating a VDN. You can see that the concept is very similar on messages, right? So those digital channels that when you move away from Avaya, you'll have that single pane of glass in a Genesys platform. Your web messaging is also going to be here. Very similar setup, right? I can set an alerting timeout there as well. My agents, when my agents do go into that RONA state or right, they've ran out of their alerting seconds, they'll see that right over here on the right-hand side of their screen, and they'll have the ability to make themselves available to take calls from the queue or go into that not responding status, right? So this is all happening very rapidly, but also your supervisors are going to see that in an out-of-the-box report, right? This is the queue activity real-time report within Genesys, and you can see right over here, my agent is in that not responding state. So my supervisor knows that I essentially have let my last interaction go to that RONA state, and they can see it, and it's called out in red for your supervisors to be able to see that very, very easily and very quickly. Again, without the extensive setup that's required on the Avaya side, right? I don't have separate VDNs. I don't have separate vectors. I haven't made any changes to my CMS reports. We can also very easily show your supervisors how many calls alerted to me and how many calls I did let go to RONA, right? So that concept of RONA that you're probably using in many of your contact centers today, still very much there in the Genesys world, just different terminology, different ways of setting that up, again, a little bit easier. So I've mentioned CMS a couple of times. So this is a report that I want to show you. This is one of those out-of-the-box reports that's just available in Genesys on day one. This is similar to your CMS split skill status report, but it's got a lot more functionality in it on day one. Over here on the left panel, you can see your traditional metrics that you would expect on your split skill status report, right? You've got the number of calls that are waiting, how many interactions are active right now. You can see your service level, your abandons, and your ASAs. Now, this actually takes a step up a little bit. And in this middle panel on the left, what you can see is interactions that are waiting, where they're coming from, how long they've been waiting, and the skills that they're assigned to. If there's any routing or priorities, you can see that as well. Bottom panel, you can see what those active interactions are doing right now, how long they've been speaking to the agent and the specific agent. That's all pretty typical stuff that you're going to see on your split skill status report. And then you can see your agent information over on the right side. Now, as a supervisor, what I can do right from this report is if I was to hover over my agent, which is myself in this case, hover over her little blue dot, I can see that she's actually on queue. As a supervisor, I can change her status by clicking on this little radio button right here. I could change my agent's status and put her, off queue. Maybe I need to have a conversation, so I can change her to, break or training, whatever the status might be. So I can actually log my agent out as well right from here. And so your supervisors, don't need to have the remote agent log off. None of that is needed. I can export and schedule these reports right from this screen as well. And the Genesys real-time refresh rate is it's near real-time, right? So in CMS, you've got your 3 to 10 second refresh rates. Maybe your actual supervisors out on the floor are using 30 seconds. In Genesys, we're across the board near real time. So you've got a more flexible and modern reporting system. And so that's a transition that a lot of our supervisors actually really love to take advantage of. Now, we've talked about VDNs and vectors. Another place where we see our customers really get hung up is the idea of using VDN and vector documentation in today's world, in that Avaya, to translate that over into call routing in the new platform. And this can be a very tedious activity because your call flow documentation is probably outdated. I'll be honest with you. I was telling my team, that it's super easy for me to, change a route point in a vector very quickly if a customer asked, but it probably took a little bit longer for me to update my actual documentation that I updated that route point. So my documentation was obviously outdated most of the time. You've heard me talk about some differences in the terminology changes, right? So that idea of RONA versus alerting, VDNs and vectors. In the Genesys world, we don't have VDNs and vectors, right? We have call routing and we have call flows, and so it's a change in mindset. And what we don't want to do is sort of that idea of lift and shift. And John will touch on that a little bit more in the future, right? So where we are seeing success and again, I'm speaking from experience, right? As an Avaya engineer for 20 years, we're deeply rooted and we're very, very loyal to our technology. And technologically, John's going to continue to touch on this, but I just want to remind you that the functionality that you have in your Avaya platform today, it's there in Genesys. It's just how we transition, how we buy in, how we proactively learn, and how we adopt. And that goes for all of the end users within your organization, right? And as an engineer, it was incredibly important for me to adopt the new technology that I was going to, and really, sort of buy into this idea that my VDNs and vectors and my announcements and my staffed agent steps were still going to be there. They were just going to be there in a different function, right? And then we also have the opportunity to move into the future and evolve and sort of move to this single pane of glass that Genesys provides us, which is, things are native in the platform. Callback is a native functionality within Genesys. Reporting, right? We won't need to have CMS. Call recording, you wouldn't need to have an additional system, like maybe you're using Zima or Calabrio in addition to your Avaya. It's all within that single pane of glass. Same for QA, same for reporting, right? So the evolution and the buying into this new platform. And I think that one of the lessons that we've really learned, and again, I'm speaking from sort of my own personal experience here and some of my interactions with our customers, is that once your technology team, right, your Avaya engineers and whoever's supporting that system, right, your CMS admins, report admins, once they understand the platform itself, we see that the transition and the buy-in and the proactive learning just becomes that much easier throughout the organization, because again, your technical team is very deeply rooted and very loyal to the platform that they're on. But take comfort in knowing that the functionality that you have in your Avaya system today is there in the Genesys world, just again with different terms. And so I'm actually going to transition back to John and have him talk through some of the specifics of where we've seen best practices and wins with our Avaya customers.
Thanks, Kate. Well, it's you're right in terms of that there's no direct path, and the functionality that exists in Avaya, and I would say significantly increased functionality exists in Genesys and all the cloud. So you have the opportunity to take advantage of capability that you may have had to stitch together through third-party solutions, or may not have been able to deliver to your business partners in the past. And so I think what I'm going to talk about now, when I talk about keys to success and best practices, I think it's important to recognize the migration as, as honestly as painful as it could be, and obviously it's a change. It's obviously a change for the organization, especially within the IT org, but to see it as an opportunity, and an opportunity to really take advantage and deliver potentially a better customer and user experience internally. And so that's really what we focus on at Inflow, is that journey. So, the keys to success, that the first thing is, it says lay the foundation. So it starts with clearly defined business objectives. What are we trying to accomplish through this migration? If it's just, and it should be more than just, hey, we're just trying to move from Avaya to Genesys, but are there specific challenges and issues and impacts of the organization that we're trying to address through this migration? Is there a specific capability that we want to either be able to deliver natively or in a more effective fashion? And then what's the impact of the organization? So it almost feels like it goes without saying, but I'm always surprised at the number of times that we're not there when we start. And so then identifying who the key technical and business stakeholders are, because the business stakeholders need to be involved in this process. And they're the ones that have to give feedback, and they have to contribute to that migration, right? To that move. And so you want to start, documenting current challenges and pain points, costs and impacts across the organization, doing technical and business requirements documentation, and obviously having a detailed project plan and a scorecard that measures success both quantitatively and qualitatively as you move forward. So just being set up with that at the very beginning puts you way ahead of most folks as you move forward. So you get through that. And then now you're getting into the next phase, which is really enablement and process design. I mentioned the new capabilities that are delivered through Genesys and quite frankly, other cloud technologies that you may not have been able to easily deliver in the past. And so some of those processes require either process optimization over the way you're delivering it today, or changes, redesign, in order to ensure the maximum impact and ROI for the tools you're bringing on. So like, for example, if you're going to take advantage of the integration capabilities that are much more easily accomplished through the cloud-based technologies through Genesys, now you're going to do more lookup and more intelligent routing and things like that through your system. Those are all processes that can be and should be redesigned to deliver a business outcome that is either reduced handle time or greater customer or self-service or things like that. And so taking the time to redesign those processes as you move through and then deploy in that new world, as opposed to being kind of anchored to what you've been doing historically, is a real opportunity as you move forward. The other thing is, lots of times that we identify as we go through these, what I would say are contact center performance issues or process issues that are identified as we work through the migration. So staff alignment, attrition, performance issues around key metrics like abandon rate, efficiency opportunities, handle time, all those things, customer impact issues and voice of customer. This is also a great time to basically address those issues as you move forward through the process. And so again, we're here as your partner to help you through that. You've got all the expertise that Kate brings to the organization and a whole host of subject matter expertise from our consulting practices out to our implementation teams and engineers that can really help you deliver not just a successful migration, but really a successful transformation of your contact center organization to align with your business objectives and best practice as you move forward. So with that, I think we'll stop. And we got a few minutes and open it up for questions. And you can just drop those questions in the Q&A field, and then we'll answer them.
Yes, we've got one. It looks like John, or maybe Kate, or maybe both of you. So we've talked about a lot of different things that are requirements when moving from Avaya to a Genesys cloud. In your assessment, and I'm paraphrasing the question here, but in your assessment, basically, what do you think are sort of the biggest or kind of major hurdles that IT and the business might have when trying to figure out how to make this move?
I can go ahead and maybe start it, and Kate, feel free to chime in. So, I think from my perspective, one of the biggest hurdles is just the mindset issues in terms of how things work. In many cases, Avaya specifically has been providing the contact center technology for years, and there's a comfort level with it. And now you're talking about evaluating new technology. And what I've seen is stakeholders really have a hard time wrapping their head around things like, okay, so there aren't vectors and VDNs, or now we're going to go to call flows and call routing. How is that actually going to work? My reporting can't possibly be this simple. And really being kind of checking that, and then there's maybe sometimes concerns about, okay, well, I'm an expert in this thing. How do I move forward into this thing, right? And so, and so really wrapping your head around that. Anytime you do something different, you have a change management initiative that you have to pull through. I always tell a story. I was at Optum before I joined InflowCX. I managed contact center operations for one of the divisions of Optum Care. And we changed the color on a screen, and we didn't alert anybody that we were doing that, but nothing else changed. Our whole organization, 1,000 seats of contact center, like shut down for an hour. I mean, it was turmoil for an hour over that change. So you can't minimize the impact of the change. The screens are going to look different, and that's why it's really important. Functions will be delivered differently, right? Capabilities will be done differently. Report terminology will be different. I think it's important. That's why I think it's really key, and quite frankly, sometimes a little bumpier, to bring those business stakeholders in and to really involve them proactively in the process. Even up to the point where you're evaluating technologies, because they're now included with you in the process. They've been heard, their requirements have been captured, and they can see their requirements have been really effectively delivered through the technology. And then, of course, rolling it out to your agents and your service delivery teams to make sure that they're well trained and prepared when you actually start to roll out the new technology. So.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that, John. And again, just speaking from experience, it is sort of letting go of that mentality of, well, I've always done this. I've always done things this way, right? I would challenge our Avaya customers on this call. How many VDNs and vectors do you have that look like this, right? Route to number, insert number. You have a VDN and a vector to route to another number. You probably have a lot of those. I know that I did in my space. And I know that when I was transitioning to a cloud contact center, it was really hard for me to let go of that mentality, thinking, okay, I need 500 VDNs and vectors, so I must need 500 call flows in the Genesys space. You don't. And so it is letting go of, sort of that, again, that deep-rooted loyalty. To John's point, Avaya is comfortable, right? We've known it for decades. And it's letting your mind be okay and comfortable with, I can accomplish all of these things in this new platform. It is just going to look and feel a little bit different, but ultimately all of the capability is there. And to John's earlier points, you're going to get a lot more functionality, a lot more feature sets, and you'll be able to create better experiences for your customers and your internal staff as well.
And that's why that kind of that upfront piece of understanding why you're doing it, what you expect to get from it, and actually measuring those outcomes, it makes the change worth it at the end of the day. Because people are saying, why are we doing this? This is why, and this is what we got from it. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind, and that's why that upfront work is so important. So.
Awesome. Well, Kate, John, we are at time. If we did not get to your question, we'll be sure to reach out and see if we can do one better, have a one-on-one discussion about your current Avaya environment and what some of your options and unique goals may be. Thank you, everyone, and looking forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thank you very much. Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.